I put on the chat. On the chat it says 1305, the Battle of Barcelona and Provence, the Rashba's Cherem. That's what it says on the chat. What the shir really is, or interconnected with that, is learning stories of Tanakh, not literally. And we'll see how this all ties in. Right. Well, that's the word. Maybe our whole life is just a muscle. Okay. So we're going to begin. We'll get right into it. Should we begin?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we start with. We know there's an idea called Ein Mikra Yotzi Midei Pshutai. A pasuk always has to retain its literal meaning. You want to give a remez that it hints to something. You want to give a drash to expound it on the deeper, or soy the mystical aspect. That's all nice and dandy. You can't forget the pshat. And Rashi many times in a pasuk will bring a drash, that to expound the pasuk. But then Rashi will say, right. But then he'll say, ein mikra yotzim midei pshutai. Right? Well, that might actually leave the pshat. Some sukkim, there are exceptions. Right, he does. Kushis are either what the gematria of Astoya. It was wishes that
like she is dark.
Exactly.
She was white.
Exactly. Why would she be dark?
No, it said it was just giving you an analogy for her beauty.
No. So there are exceptions. Wait. Where does the cloud come up? It comes up from a debate in Masechta Shabbos between the Tanoim, there's Rabbi Lezer, the Chachomim. Are you allowed to walk out on Shabbos in a place where there's no Eruv? And there's a real Rishus Harabim. And you're going out with your sword, You're walking out carrying your sword. Rabbi Lezer says it's fine. It's a tachshit. It's an ornament. It's beauty. And the Chum say no. I'm not going to be chayiv for carrying. Rabbi Lezer says I have a pasuk. It's a pasuk in Tilim. Chager, charbecha, al yorech, gibor, hoidcha, vahadorecha. Which means that, O mighty one, gird upon yourself your sword. It's your beauty. Rabbi Lezer says, you see? A sword is a person's beauty, it's your statesmanship, etc. The Chum say, what are you talking about? The Pasuk's talking about a Talmud Chacham. And it's saying that the Torah that he knows, that's his armor, that's his ammunition, that's his beauty. The Blazer says, what do you mean? Ein mikra yotzim midei pshutai. It could be talking about Torah as well, but do not forget the fact that the Pasuk is saying a sword is beautiful. In fact, the Gemara there says, Rav Kana said, wow, I learned through Kol HaTorah Kula, but I never heard that word, that Ein Mikra Yotzim Midei Pshutai. It was a new thing. It wasn't so obvious. So this is the rule. Now, there definitely are exceptions. The Rambam, I'm going to quote a number of things from Moreh Nevuchim tonight. I wanted to get it on the paper. I didn't have time, didn't have enough space. But you'll just believe me. You can check it up later. The Rambam has a parak where he discusses, the Torah speaks about Hashem's hands. Right? Yad Hashem. Ein mikra yotzim midei pshutai. Hashem has to have a hand. What do you mean? Hashem has a hand. The Rambam lays out a rule like this. He says, if it's obvious that it's not literal, meaning it's absurd to assume that it's literal, it doesn't make any sense, then it's as if the pasuk is screaming, I'm just a euphemism. It's as if the Eibush is clearly telling you that it means something else and it's just a mashal. So that's already rule number one. When you're talking about God, the Torah uses certain words which are clearly not literally. Now, how do you know if it's clearly not literal? If it's an absurdity intellectually. Being that the Rambam believes that to say the Eibishter has body-like features is absolute rubbish, it's impossible. It's logically absurd. By the way, the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva says that someone who believes Hashem has a limb is an apikairos. Yeah. The Ravid famously writes very sharp words. The Ravid says, wow, there were people that were greater than him, meaning the Rambam, who did believe the Eibishter has some type of body. And the Rambam just wants to call them all apikursim. The Ravid said, what do you want from them? They learned Chumash, they learned Nach, they saw what the Pasuk says about Hashem's body, so they mistakenly assumed these were big people. How does the Rambam have the chutzah to say they're apikursim? So what did I once quoted that the great Kozhnitzer Maggid said that when the Rambam wrote this halacha, many souls were thrown out of Gan Eden. The Koshner Samagit said when the Rambam learned this halacha, many souls were thrown out of Gan Eden because they were considered halachically apikursim. People that were scholars and had, for some reason, because of what it says in the Psukim, they came to some strange for us, not for them, conclusion that the Eibishter does have some whatever bodily characteristics. And once the Rambam paskined the apikursim, they were thrown out. And when the Ravid wrote what he wrote, they were allowed back in. And then he said that the Rambam apparently later in life, when the Rambam at the end learned Kabbalah, the Rambam took back his opinion. Because in philosophy, to say God has any bodily descriptions is just an absurdity. But once you learn Kabbalah, we say in Pasach Eliyahu, Chesed is Hashem's right hand, the left hand. It doesn't mean Hashem has a body, but we use these descriptions because they're actually the most fitting description, however, to describe the spheres. So then the Rambam backed off. He said, he backed off. He, in fact, reversed his own opinion, which is a big thing to say that what the Rambam wrote in Mishnah Torah is not his final halacha. Is obviously a big thing to say. Anyhow, back to the ranch. So the Rambam writes, and that's what the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva about that. Back to what he says in Moreh Nevuchim, he says, if the pasuk says God has a Etzbe Elokim, the finger of God, it's a pasuk in Chumash by the Makkos. Hashem says a finger. Says the Rambam, because it's so logical that Hashem doesn't have fingers, it's as if the pasuk is saying, "Don't take me literal." So that's probably the first major exception to Ein Mikra Yotzei Midei Pshutei. Okay, so having said that there are exceptions, but you know what it does? It opens the door, which is what? Whenever the pshutoi is illogical, now who decides that? Whoever's learning it. That gives the mefarish the right to say it doesn't mean literal.
Who makes that call?
The mefarish. You have to. Well, that's the shayla.
If that break the plates is over here.
Exactly. Right. So what's considered not making sense? What's considered an absurdity? Okay. So having said that, let's begin. We're going to go on a bit of a journey tonight, but that's the way it is. Okay, number one. We begin in the beginning of Chumash. This is an old print of the Ibn Ezra. In the yeshiva, we only have old prints. We would love to be able to renew the library. Mitzvah Hashem, the Eibush will help. Get some new books over there.
Right, the print is better?
The new books?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have the Ibn Ezra in square letters.
You have it all electronic.
I'm not the one getting in the way. There's lots of whatever bureaucracy. What's the word? There's
red tape.
To get anything done. There's a whole hierarchy of anyhow. Listen, the story of the snake. The snake speaks to Chava. So if you look in the Psukim, it says the snake spoke to Chava and it said, did the Eibishter, not allow you to eat from the fruits? No, he began a discussion with her to talk about the trees in the Garden of Eden in order to speak about the Eitz Hadas. So the shaila is, was the snake actually speaking? Was the snake hissing? Like, what exactly happened? So the Ibn Ezra brings a number of opinions. One opinion is, the snake hissed. The snake hissed and Chava understood. So how did Chava speak back? It must be not only she understood, she spoke it too.
She spoke snake.
Exactly. I mentioned once, not too long ago, that when the Alter Rebbe was once traveling to Mezrich, he stopped off in Koretz, and he chapped a shmuz with Reb Pinchas Koretzer, the great student of the Baal Shem Tov. Reb Pinchas very much wanted the Alter Rebbe to remain. And Reb Pinchas said, if you stay by me, I'll teach you Ma'aser Bereishis, the secrets of creation, the secrets of Kabbalah, of Ma'aser Merkava, and I'll teach you the language of the birds. And the Alter Rebbe told him, a soul comes down into this world to learn three things. Yochid, Echad, and Vo'ed. 3 levels of Hashem's unity with creation, and that's it. And with that, he picked up his, and he left. Ouch. When he came to Mezrich, before he told the Maggid anything, the Maggid said, yes, over here I will teach you Yechuda Tator and Yechuda Ilah. Years later, the Alter Rebbe was once traveling with his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek. They were on a wagon. They pulled over to the side of the road. It was shash still, except for some birds chirping. after a bit of time, the Alter Rebbe turned to the Tzemach Tzedek and he said, if one has good hearing and a sharp mind, or a clear mind, you'll be able to figure out the language of the birds. So he got it, the Alter Rebbe got it anyways. So the Shaila is maybe Chava just understood the language of the snakes. That's one opinion. Another opinion, he says, look at number 1 at the top. V'yomer Rab Sadia Gaon. The Ibn Ezra is quoting Rab Sadia Gaon. By the way, the Ibn Ezra was 75 years old. This I mamish find fascinating. The Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Avraham Ibn Ezra, was 75 years old. And he was writing a poem or a letter. And he quoted a pasuk from this week's parsha. The Avraham, which is his own name, Ben Chomesh Shanim V'Shivim Shana, he was 75, but say so Mechoran when he left Choran. Avraham was 75 when he departed, shortly after he died. And that's right before the Ibn Ezra died, he was busy writing this pasuk that Avraham was 75 when he departed. The Mittel Rebbe writes in a Maimer that the Ibn Ezra was killed al Kiddush Hashem. I don't know of any other source that says that. The Mittel Rebbe writes in a Maimer that the Ibn Ezra was killed al Kiddush Hashem.
What do we know? It was in Spain.
He was all over. He started in Spain, but he was a poor man. He writes, he lived 75 years, so it was either 1089 till 1164 or 3 years later. He was what?
Spain was good for the Jews.
Yeah, but he didn't make a penny.
Isn't he the one that said that if the people would, if he would make that Christian, people would
exactly, and if he made candles, the sun would be set. Right. So he was a great writer. He used to write poems for people, and that's how. But he traveled all around. He was everywhere. He was all over Europe. He was in England. He was in England once for Shabbos. When he was in England, he wrote a whole thing to prove that people then were saying that Shabbos starts Saturday morning dawn and it goes for 24 hours, first day and then night. And he wrote a whole piece then how it's the other way around. So, and that was in London. Confuse people. Now, so the Ibn Ezra says, he quotes Reb Sadia Gaon. The Friedrich Rebbe told, I just can't hold myself back from throwing in all these tidbits, even though they're all just parentheses. The Friedrich Rebbe once told the Rebbe.
Germany is the thing.
But sometimes you just want to drive. As imagine you're driving to a certain point,
and
the driver stops every 2 minutes.
Hours.
It's like we're driving to the top of the mountain, the beautiful view, and the driver every 2 minutes wants to stop at the small views. Some people like it, no, go weiter. This is garnished. Let's get to the peak.
Small views are enjoyable.
Exactly. Exactly.
Everybody's crowded at the
Exactly. So
it seems like you've never done a tour in Israel. That's all they do.
I actually haven't. I was once on a tour, and on the first day, they say, here's Shmuel Anovi's buried. 10 miles later, there's Shmuel Anovi's buried. There's Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Beis.
Yesterday you told us that. That was Shmuel Aleph, not Shmuel Beis.
Yeah. So the Friedrich Rebbe told the Rebbe that the Rebbe Rashab every year would learn Chumash with a different Mefarish. Every year the Rebbe Rashab would focus and pick another Mefarish to learn. So the Rebbe asked the Friedrich Rebbe, did he also learn Ibn Ezra? And the Friedrich Rebbe said, yeah, also Ibn Ezra. There was a big hesitation. What's the hesitation? The Ibn Ezra really shook the boat in his time, because when the Ibn Ezra explains Chumash, he doesn't, what the Gemara and Medrash say is really not relevant to him. He's a Pashtan. He just wants to explain the pshat of the pasuk. If it goes against the traditions that we have, it doesn't matter. We have a letter that the Rambam wrote to his son. The Rambam wrote a letter to his son, Rabbi Avraham, encouraging him to learn Ibn Ezra. Because we're going to see that Rambam in Mer Nevuchim also learned many of the stories of Tanakh were not literal. The letter that the Rambam wrote, it's a debate if it's a forgery. I mean, it's been accepted for hundreds of years, but there are those that believe...
The letter.
So it's a letter that we have.
You're talking about something else.
Something, I don't know.
No, but this is the same thing. The Rambam, they say, wrote a letter that what was a forgery? That the Mefarshim stick to the pshat that read Ibn Ezra.
The Rambam wrote a letter to
No,
his son
it's about the
encouraging
Rashba.
him
It's
to
about the
learn
Rashba.
Ibn Ezra.
Yeah, but it's the same idea.
Yeah.
Is that in Geras Rambam?
What about the Rashba? What do you?
Oh, I asked you about the Rashba. The Rashba says he's up to like Rashi, his grandfather.
Rashbam.
Rashbam, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, let's leave
He doesn't like Jews.
let's leave that.
Doesn't like Medrash.
We're about to have the parentheses on the parentheses on the parentheses. Let's get back to the ranch. So the Maharshal, the great Maharshal, writes in the introduction to one of his Sfarim. We still haven't started yet. This is just, we're warming up. Maharshal writes in one of his introductions, he was very upset at the Ibn Ezra, because Ibn Ezra ignores Gemara and Medrash, it's ignoring Jewish tradition, and teaching psukim, teaching stories and things, not the way you learn in Cheder. And the Maharshal says, I'm so upset at the Ibn Ezra, I'm even upset at the Rambam that he encouraged his son to learn Ibn Ezra. The Maharshal then says, I did hear that the Ibn Ezra got up and publicly announced, I'm not arguing on the Gemara and the Medrash, I'm learning Chumash according to the way I understand. I'm not negating what the Gemara and Medrash say at all. I'm just writing a Piddush, a Pshat on. But the Maharshal says, with all said and done, it's a problem because he gave room. He doesn't say for Reform Judaism, it didn't exist yet, but for that idea. He says, because people all blamed Ibn Ezra. In fact, the funniest thing is,
Really?
You go to a Chassidish yeshiva, they're quoting Ibn Ezra. You go to Litvish, they're quoting Ibn Ezra. You go to Reform, everyone's quoting Ibn Ezra. Because...
It's universal.
Right, but the Maharshal says he did give room for, free thinkers to come on the scene and say, well, listen, the Ibn Ezra said that, the miracle never happened, so I believe the same thing. Anyhow. Al Kapanim, now that we've disgraced him, we can learn what he said. Nachas Hashem. He was a very, very great man. Very, very great man. Let's see what he says. V'yoyim Rav Sadia Gaon. Rav Sadia Gaon says, Acher sheizbara lanu she'ein dibur v'das kiyim ba'adam levado. Rav Sadia Gaon says, only a man can speak. Animals cannot speak. Nitzdarach loymar. So what do you say about the snake? So we said some say the snake hissed. Rav Sadia Gaon doesn't buy that, because how did Chava understand? The snake didn't hiss, the snake spoke. How could the snake speak? Only humans could speak. Another option.
Snake also had feet.
Ki hanachash gam ha'ostan loy dibru. Says Rav Sadia Gaon, the snake did not speak. Neither did Bilam's donkey, says Rav Sadia Gaon. It didn't speak. Rak malach dibe b'shvilam. There was a malach speaking on behalf of the snake. A malach spoke on behalf of the donkey. So when Bilam sees the donkey, first the donkey speaks, and then the angel speaks. According to Sadia Gaon, they're both an angel. Just first there was an angel speaking through or on behalf of the donkey. Maybe it appeared the donkey was speaking, but it was the malach. And then there was direct vision and revelation from a malach, which is not the simple reading of the story. According to Sadia Gaon, both the donkey and the malach of Bilam are both a malach. That's not the simple reading of the story in Parshas Balak. But says...
And things that were created.
Right, well maybe that was the malach that would ultimately speak on behalf of the donkey. But
if it was in Gemara, I think the Gemara would have said that. The Chumash might not, because they guard their words and it's limited, but the Gemara, they expound on it.
What
was
actually created?
It says the mouth of the
What
donkey.
do you mean, the mouth?
Not the power of an animal to speak. Okay, fine. Points taken. But Rabbi Sadia Gaon says when it comes to the snake, it was a malach speaking on its behalf. Says Ibn Ezra, V'heishiv Olav Rav Shmuel ben Chafni. Rav Shmuel ben Chafni was unhappy with what Rabbi Sadia Gaon says. He was one of the last Gaonim in Bavel. He was the father-in-law of Rav Hai Gaon, the last Gaon. We once learned the whole thing of Shmuel ben Chafni about what he says about the whole story of Shaul, summoning up when he went to the woman who summoned up Shmuel's body from the grave.
Abner's mother.
Shmuel ben Chafni, exactly. Shmuel ben Chafni has a very interesting take on that story. He believes the whole thing never happened. What? We did it. We learned it. I believe
When
we
he
did
laid
it.
on the table,
No, because that he tainas that there was somebody behind the curtain who was speaking. They made believe it was a whole.
Like the 1800s.
It was a whole ceremony. Shmuel ben Chafni tainas. Miracles come from the hand of God. Outside the hand of God, magic can do nothing. So Bechlal, he was a rationalist, and that story, which I wasn't going to mention tonight, but that story about Shaul raising up Shmuel's body from the grave, it's a classical example of somebody on the caliber of Rav Shmuel ben Chafni, talking about 1,000 years ago, who says, I don't care what it seems like from the psukim, it doesn't make sense to have happened because I don't believe that magic has the power to do that, and therefore whatever it says in the psukim, you have to dray and twist, and it was all just a great magic trick.
Got it right.
It was a magic trick.
It's a 50-50 chance.
No, because the prophecy they gave, he says that they realized logically. They knew there would be war against the Plishtim. They knew Shaul would die. It was just an educated...
50-50 guess. You either win or
No, it
lose.
was like 80-20. It was 80-20. They felt confident enough. Anyhow, but either way, Shmuel ben Chafni is not happy with Rav Sadia Gaon's pshat that the snake never spoke. The Sadia Gaon says the snake didn't speak. A malach spoke on its behalf. And then he says, V'hinei kom Rab Shloime Hasfardi, Baal Hashirim, that's Rab Shloime ibn Gabirol, one of the great early Rishonim in Spain. He was murdered in his late 20s by someone who was a jealous person. Rab Shloime ibn Gabirol, he was brought to Spain by Rab Shmuel Hanagid. Shmuel Hanagid was a wealthy man in Spain. And he was almost like a koil. He said, come to me. He wanted to bring the best and the brightest to Spain. You're talking about in the early 1000s. And I'll pay for you, not just for your travel, I'll pay for everything you need. And Shmuel Hanagid was also big in grammar. He brought Reb Shloime ibn Gabirol, who was a great linguist, a philosopher, and everything. A very great man. Actually, this Shloime ibn Gabirol was going hungry, so he created a goylem, a girl, to cook in his kitchen. Yeah. We have a tradition. Shloime ibn Gabirol, when he was in 20s, he wanted to have, I'm busy learning. I want something at 6 p.m. He made a goylem, a girl, to cook for him in the kitchen.
Modern problems.
But there was an Arabic scholar. There was an Arabic scholar who was jealous of Shloime ibn Gabirol, and when Shloime ibn Gabirol was walking down the street, he was pounced upon. The Arab killed him. The Arab then buried him. The story's not over. The Arab then buried him in the back of his. And there was a tree there. And very quickly, through fertilization, whatever it was, fruit started growing on the tree. And this Arab, his tree, gave fruits before any of the other trees around town. People were talking about it until it got word to the officials, and they went to his backyard and started digging, and they found the body of Shloime ibn Gabirol. This is that's the story. Anyhow, so he comes up here too. V'chacham gadol haya, says the Ibn Ezra, this Reb Shloime, the Spaniard, was a very wise man. V'hei shiva al Shmuel, he knocks off Reb Shmuel. There's a whole back and forth here. He doesn't say what they said. V'hayosher be'einai, but what I believe is shehem advorim k'mashmom. Punkt here, the Ibn Ezra says, I think it's literal. The snake spoke. V'hanochash haya medarber, the snake spoke. Walk straight. How could it speak? He said a beautiful lashon. V'hasam das ba'adam samboy. The same being that gave us knowledge gave knowledge to the snake. V'hinei ha'pasuk hey, the pasuk testifies ki haya arum mikol chayes asada. The snake was sharper than all the other animals. Rak like adam, not like man, but almost like man. So this isn't the whole Ibn Ezra. So what we have here, there's actually 4 opinions by the snake. Either that it hissed, or you have Reb Sadia Gaon, and it's that it was the snake, but there was a malach that spoke on his behalf. The Ibn Ezra learned it was Kipshutai. That's probably how Rashi learned the snake pasha spoke. There is another opinion, that of Rabbeinu Bechaya. Rabbeinu Bechaya says there was no snake. No snake. It's the Satan. Satan and Nachash are almost, it's the same gematria, same letters, just the ches and the tes. The Satan Bechal is a snake, the way he gets us. He's a slithering, deceitful being.
Meaning the evil inclination.
Right, well, So that's what Rabbeinu, it was the Satan. So what does that mean? Does that literally mean the Satan appeared to her as a malach? You would imagine, in other words, she had a vision, she saw an angel. She saw an angel.
It was her Yetzirah.
Right?
Except, how did that impregnate her? Some say Cain was her.
That opinion holds. That's one opinion who holds that Cain was born from her in the snake. I mean, the Gemara, the fact that the Nachash had relations with Chava is that's quoted in Chazal. Rabbeinu Bechaya might say that snake is not the snake that spoke to her. The snake that spoke to her was the Satan. Yeah, there was a snake in Gan Eden. That's something else.
Relations with her.
Didn't have a body. Unless he then went into the body of the snake. So then you may as well say he spoke to her from the body of the snake. He spoke to her when he was just
wasn't the snake the same way it
spiritual
wasn't
being,
the mouth of the thing? It was an angel.
Hold on. So far you have 4 opinions. Hold on. Rabbeinu Bechaya says a whopper. There was no snake. It was the Satan. But then we have 3 opinions. There was a snake. Rav Saadia Gaon says there was a snake, but the Malach spoke through it. There's an opinion the snake hissed. The Ben Ezra says the snake Poshet spoke Lashon Kodesh. Then there's the Abarbanel. The Abarbanel, who's later than all these people. The Abarbanel is 1400s. Abarbanel was originally the finance minister in Portugal. Till after some saga, he was sent out of Portugal. He was in Spain, and in 1492 he went with all the Yidden, and he went east to the islands there in Turkey and Italy. The Abarbanel says the whole story of the snake never happened. It was all in Chava's mind. The whole thing was in Chava's mind. That she started thinking, well, what's the big deal? Let me eat from the tree. What's the big deal?
Possible.
So wait. So let me ask you, does the Abarbanel fit with any of the 4 opinions we mentioned? The Ibn Ezra says the snake spoke, obviously doesn't fit with that. Those that say the snake hissed, it also doesn't fit. The Saadia Gaon says there was a snake, but the Malach spoke on its behalf, also doesn't fit. But it does fit with Rabbeinu Bechaya. Because Rabbeinu Bechaya says there was no snake, it was just the Satan. And we ask, so what did she see? Did the Satan appear in front of her? You could say no. The Satan came to her in her mind.
Right.
So if you put that Abarbanel to Rabbeinu Bechaya, it fits. That Abarbanel says, I'm not denying the psukim. I'm telling you what the story meant was the snake is the Satan. And it didn't appear to her as a vision. It was in her mind. So the question is, when you're learning Pshuta Shal Mikra, this is like one of the first examples. All of these Mefarshim believe this is what happened. Reb Saadia Gaon is telling you this is what happened. The Ibn Ezra is telling you, no, this is what happened. Those that say it hissed say this is what happened. Rabbeinu Bechaya says this is what happened. There was no snake, it was the Satan. When the Abarbanel says it was in her mind, he's telling you that is what happened. They're all arguing over the pshat. And obviously some of them fit more in the actual text. Some of them make more sense logically. Right? Most of these Mefarshim will tell the Ibn Ezra, you really think the snake spoke? Why jump to radical conclusions? So this is the art. When you learn Pshuta Shal Mikra, you have to know that sometimes, when are you loyal to the text at the expense of saying an outlandish pshat? Sometimes you got to, play with the text a little to make a pshat which makes more sense. Anyhow, so that's just the first example. We move on. So that Rashi is Pshuta Shal Mikra, but not to the extent of the Rashi is explaining Pshuta Shal Mikra based on the tradition of Chazal. He's going to use the traditions of Torah Sheba'al Peh that you have in Medrash and Gemara to explain Pshuta Shal Mikra. He'll only quote it as a kashem Pshuta Shal Mikra, and he'll only quote what's going to help you understand the Pshuta Shal Mikra, but he's going to quote fancy Medrashim. Rashi will quote big miracles or things like that. But then you have there's a whole list of the real Pashtanim. Rashi's grandson, the Rashbam, the Ibn Ezra, the Radak, and others who, they want to learn the Pashtas, even if it comes at the expense of not following the tradition of Medrash and Gemara. Okay, let's go right to number 2. There actually aren't that many sources today. Some of these are just stories. Number 2 is a big one. The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim. Now, the Rambam is the greatest of the great, but in his time, he was in hot water. As is known, they burnt his Sfarim. I think we mentioned this not too long ago.
Some guy got killed.
Twice. It was in 1234 in Montpellier and 1242 in Paris. Twice they burnt the Rambam Sfarim, particularly the Moreh Nevuchim, the guide to become perplexed, as we say. The guide for the perplexed. Because the Rambam writes there things which really many of the Rishonim felt were not compatible with mainstream Judaism. And we're going to see some things over here. The Rambam says, the story in next week's parsha.
What?
What?
Oh yeah,
Because in Moreh Nevuchim, the Rambam writes many things. That's,
the burning them.
why?
Why were they specific?
It was.
Why more than anything else? Why did the guy care about more than that?
So because there was the Yidden made such a shturim against it, the Goyim were more than happy to get involved.
Yeah, the Yidden helped.
And the history behind it, the history by the government, it was the monks, the religious Goyim were more than happy. They heard that the Yidden, are having internal machlokes. They were more than happy to get involved.
Wagons?
That was another thing. They burnt 24 wagons,
Right,
Bechlal of all the Sforim they had, right after they burnt the Rambam, right. And that's a saga that we discussed. Right, maybe it was by a Shabbos year that we discussed it. Anyhow, whatever it was. So, the Rambam writes in Moreh Nevuchim, in next week's parsha, the three angels come to Avraham Avinu. Now, you assume it's a real story, right? I mean, you have so many details, what he fed them. I mean, every detail. In fact, there's a machlokes between the Gemara and the Medrash if they even ate. The Gemara says they made believe they ate. It's a Gemara in Bab Metzia. There's a Medrash called Tonad Ve'Elio says, no, they didn't believe, they actually ate. They actually ate.
There's the whole shaila. They ate nuchits and fleishiks.
Right, exactly. The whole exactly. So no. But you can say even if they didn't eat, how did Avraham serve them? He thought they would eat. He thought they would eat. I want to parentheses. The Alter Rebbe would often visit a city called Shklov. Shklov is a city in Belarus, and it was for the Misnagdim, it was a hot spot. He had thousands of scholars. He had hundreds of people there, Bakiyim, B'Shas, huge Go'anim, and the Alter Rebbe liked visiting there. He had a long history visiting that city. Anyhow, one time he came, and they honored, even though they were Misnagdim, but they honored the Alter Rebbe, because there they knew the Alter Rebbe's greatness. They honored him to come to the big shul. The place was packed. The Alter Rebbe was going to, answer people's questions, maybe give a shir. When the Alter Rebbe got up, he was challenged. And they said that, not too long ago, some of your Chassidim were here. And they said in your name something unacceptable. They said in your name that neshamas are pnimiyim. And a malach is a chitzon. A malach, does something externally. And a neshama is a pnimi. They said, that's such chassidish rubbish. They said, what chassidish rubbish you're teaching? A malach is a chitzon. And they said, bring us a mocker. And don't quote no zoyars. We want Bavli Yerushalmi. The Alter Rebbe said it's a mefurish Gemara. What Gemara? He says a Gemara Bab Metzia. The Alter Rebbe said, the Gemara says in Bab Metzia, in the Pays, you should always follow the custom of the locale. Because when Moshe went up to heaven, he acted like an angel. He didn't eat for 40 days and 40 nights. When the Malachim descended to Elam Hazeh, they made believe they ate. Moshe Taka took on the custom of heaven. He Taka didn't eat. When the Malachim descended, they didn't eat, according to the Gemara. They made believe they ate. See, Malach is a chitzon, and the Shom is a pnimi. That was the raya the Alter Rebbe had. But anyhow, the point is...
About the malach in general, the only thing that can make that can elevate the sparks of the tzutzis b'chlal, make the elevation, is a neshama in a guf. Even malachim and neshamas in Gan Eden, there's nothing they can't be mechadish anything. There's no chidushay Torah up there in heaven, and it's only what you learn down here.
It's all happening down here. Right. Well, that's why we're here tonight.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing.
Everyone is a chiyuv. The Alter Rebbe says today in Tanya. I think today, yes.
Mechadish to...
You have to be mechadish Torah.
Right. But what we're learning tonight is you got to be careful what you mechadish. Some chidushim are acceptable. Some of them are not acceptable. Fine. So back to the ranch.
To a friend, that's why he's supposed to talk about.
So it sounds like the story mamash happened. The malachim appeared to Avraham, and that's it. The Rambam says it was all a vision. The Rambam says, it says Hashem, Vayera Hashem al Avram, Hashem appeared to Avram, and right after speaks about the three people. Says the Rambam, it was all a vision. The three malachim was all a vision. The whole Suda of Avram serving the bread and the flesh, the milchiks, it was all just a vision. It was all a vision. So let's read this. Now the Ramban in Vayera quotes this and rips it apart. Says the Rambam, this is the Ramban number 2. The second one, Ubesefer Mer Nevuchim Nemar, Ki HaParsha Klal HaPrat. The parsha starts off with the general thing that God appeared, and then it details. Amar HaKos of Tchila. First it says that Nirei Lov Hashem appeared B'maris HaNavua, in a vision of a prophecy. Ve'eich Hoysa Hamara Hazos. Now what was the vision? The Pasuk then says, Ki Nasa Einov B'mara. Avram lifts up his eyes, and the Rambam says, in a vision, V'hine Gimel Anoshim. We're number 2. There were 3 people standing on top of him. Vayom, and then Avram said to Hashem, if I found favor in your eyes, etc. Zeh Sipur Masha'ama B'mara Navua Le'echod Mehem. This is a story of what he said in the vision to one of those malachim. Hagadol Shemem, the greatest of them. V'im B'mara Lo Niru Elov. And the Rambam says, if it wasn't a vision, Rak Anoshim Oichlim Boser, it was just Anoshim eating flesh. Eich Omar V'yera Elov. How could Hashem appear to him? Hine Lo Niru Lo Hashem Lo B'mar V'Lo B'machshava. The pasuk doesn't say what the vision was. So the Rambam wants to say, if it says Hashem appeared to him, but then he sees 3 men, if it was literally 3 men eating flesh, so where was God? Where was the prophecy? V'hinei l'dvar, according to the Rambam, says the Ramban, lo yilosha sora ugus, Sarah didn't bake any cakes, and there was no matzah, v'lo yasa Avram didn't shecht any cow, v'gam lo yitzaka, the whole story of Sarah laughing, it also never happened. Rak hakol b'mar is all a vision.
So she laughed in Avram's head?
Why call it?
Yeah, why call
The
it?
Imkain, bo'ach haloim hazeh b'roiv inyan, kachaloim es hasheker. Then this dream, this vision is like a false dream. Why should Avram dream that Sarah laughed and then Sarah got punished for laughing? I mean, why would Avram see that if it never happened? I mean, what? Why? Kimatoy eles laharis. Why show that? Why show that to him? Now the Rambam continues. The Ramban is quoting the Rambam, a vort here, and then he argues, and a vort there, and he argues. He now quotes the Rambam in Parshas Vayishlach. I mean, the Rambam in Mer Nevuchim speaks about the fight between Yaakov and the angel in Vayishlach. The Rambam says the fight never happened. It was a vision. Now, why was Yaakov limping after? V'chein Omar be'inyan vaya'avik ish imay, that Yaakov fought with an angel. It's all b'mara hanavu. It's all a vision. Says Ramban, v'lo yadaiti lama ha'yitzalei al yarecha b'hak. It's why when Yaakov awoke, was he limping? You know, if you get hurt in your dream when you wake up, you know how you... If in a vision, you know, you get really hurt. So when you wake up,
Isn't there some connection, by the way? There's some
could
spirituality.
the question is to what degree? Sometimes it goes the other way. If while you're sleeping, you know, you hurt yourself, you feel some pain, then you'll imagine that in your dream. But here we're saying fakir, that something that happens in your vision should leave a physical and permanent. Yaakov wasn't permanent. Could have been if the Eibusher wouldn't have healed it. Anyhow. And V'lama Omar, he says more than that. Yaakov said, wow, I saw God face to face and I was saved. Well, he expected to be heard from his prophecy. The Nevi'im are never afraid they're going to die from their prophecy. And not just that. Yaakov saw greater visions. He saw God, the Eibusher appeared to Yaakov. Right? And Yaakov never said, wow, I can't believe I survived that. You know, Shimshon's father said that Manoach, but Yaakov never said, wow, I survived. This small vision when he had a fight with an angel in his vision, that he was surprised that he survived. And then he continues saying that Bechlal, according to the Rambam, if the Malachim never came to planet Earth, it was a vision, so they never went to Lot. If they never went to Lot, so then the Goyim in Stoim never surrounded Lot's house to kill them, right? Well, it's like the whole thing never happened. And you say, well, maybe Lot was a prophet, but then maybe Lot also had a prophecy. But what are all the men of Stoim? He says a couple lines later, you think all the men of Stoim, they're Roim, V'chatoim, they're also prophets? How did they know that Lot was having a vision? And
Teasing.
no, it says maybe that was all part of Lot's vision. He says, but that means that maybe the whole destruction of Stoim was all a vision. Says Ramban, according to the Rambam, you might lead to say, maybe this, we're still all in the vision. It's all still the vision about. he finishes off by saying, I'll just read the last line. Eilad dvarim soisrim hakosov, the words of the Rambam contradict the pasuk. Asru l'shaymim is forbidden to hear them. Af, and forget about to believe them. It's asur to hear them, forget about to believe in them. Woo! So
Heavy stuff.
So the Rambam said about the story of the Malachim, the fight of Yaakov and the angel. The Rambam also says it about the donkey of Bilam. Now that we said Nishkefelig, we saw in number 1, Reb Sadia Gaon already said that the donkey never spoke. It was a malach that spoke on the donkey's behalf. Well, the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim says a similar thing. The Rambam says that you think a donkey spoke to Bilam? Come on, where are your brains? The Rambam says that. You think that it doesn't make sense, says the Rambam. It was a vision. It was a prophecy that Bilam was having. Now, is that the exact same as Reb Sadia Gaon? I don't know. When Reb Sadia Gaon says that the malach spoke on behalf of the donkey,
Not
Not a vision.
but is that a prophecy? Because Reb Sadia Gaon has to divide between when the malach spoke on behalf of the donkey to verse when the malach spoke directly to Bilam. When the malach spoke to Bilam directly, that's a vision. That's a nevuah. Yeah. When the malach spoke on behalf of the donkey, is that the same level or not?
Why does he stop there though? I mean, then you can go the whole Torah. I'm saying it's very.
Yeah. All right, let's go.
I'm saying why would the Rambam stop there? Then?
So the Rambam. Okay, right.
I mean, the brothers. The
We're gonna.
sale,
Okay.
the Makkas. I mean,
He
know.
does.
You know what? When I was young and I was a kid, I was learning the story of Yosef and the brothers, and it wasn't my first time. And I said, "This can't be. It doesn't make sense. It must be. It's probably a marshal. How could it be? It doesn't make sense." And the person next to me almost gave me such a phrase that. Anyhow,
And then later
but
found out that
there, what was pushing me to say that it wasn't literal is just because how could the brothers do it? It's just like. But then you get a bit older, you see how jealousy works. So, yeah. Anyhow, no, but no, there's actually no.
People come to your house. That must be fake.
No. But when you see more about life and how, there's definitely more room to understand the story. But Al Kapanim, when it comes to the donkey, the Rambam says that it was part of a vision that Bilam had. The donkey spoke to. It was like a dream. It was a vision that he was having. I don't know if it's exactly the same as Reb Sadia Gaon, who says
No,
a malach
Reb Sadia
spoke on
Gaon
behalf. No, because
It's saying Bilam
No.
speaking back.
but Reb Sadia, that might be in the vision. When Reb Sadia Gaon says a malach spoke on behalf of the donkey, that might also be a vision. Okay, we have to clear. But Al Kapanim, so we have these wild Rambams, and we have the Ramban who writes very harsh words against the Rambam. Okay, we continue. We're going to go through some stories in Nach, and then we're going to see what does this have to do with the year 1305. Fascinating. Oh, it's already. Okay, let's go. So there's a story in Nach. I'm going to begin with a story in Yehoshua. Shemesh begivain doim. Yeshua is fighting a war in Eretz Yisrael. You see, when the Yidden came to Eretz Yisrael, there was a nation called the Givainim. And they made believe they were a far-off nation and they happened to be in the land. They made a peace treaty with the Yidden. Afterwards, Yeshua found out that they were really Canaanim and they would have had to make a different type of peace treaty. But either way, the deal was done. Shortly after, a number of the Canaanite nations pounced on the Givainim. They heard the Givainim had made this peace treaty with the Yidden. Traitors, you're allowing the enemy in. And they surrounded the Givainim to fight. The Givainim send a letter to Yeshua. You're our ally. You're our ally. Come help. Hashem tells Yeshua, go. The Yidden fight, and there was a tremendous victory. And it says that the sun stood still. It says in the Psukim, the sun stood still. Does that mean literally that the sun stood still? So any kid that learns the story, not just any kid, if you learn the Gemara in Avodah Zarah mentions numerous opinions. If the sun was stood for 6 hours, 12 hours, one opinion says 24 hours, 36 hours. But a huge miracle definitely took place. Comes the Ralbag. The Ralbag was one of the great Rishonim. He was around from like 1280 to 1340, that time period. He was a great astronomer, and there is a crater on the moon named after him. It's called, if you check it up, it's called Rabbi Levi. Till today in England, check it up right now. Rabbi Levi is going to give you a picture of a crater on the moon named after the Ralbag. And then after that, you could check up a crater called Aben Ezra, named after the Rabbi Avram Ibn Ezra. They were astronomers. You check it up, Rabbi Levi.
Yeah,
it's called Rabbi Levi.
So random.
Rabbi Levi. The Ralbag was one of the craters on the moon.
Where did he live?
Either France or Spain. One of them.
Rabbi Levi West.
What did you say,
So-
Rabbi Levi and who?
There's actually two craters.
Aben
Yeah,
Ezra.
it's
west.
no, it's an area.
Ezra.
It's west of
Aben
Rabbi
Ezra.
Levi and Rabbi Levi. It's going on.
So, the Rab Levi ben Gershon, the Ralbag,
Gersonides.
right, Gershonides.
Gersonides.
The Ralbag,
Gersonides.
in his day, he was mamash. He was as much as the Rambam was criticized for being a free thinker. He was like past the pale.
Rabbah.
The Ralbag was past
Worse?
the pale. Worse. The Ralbag says that by Yeshua the sun never stopped. It never stopped.
No song.
No, it's like those. It's like the people say you think. What? There's no-
No song in Australia. Timeless.
Okay, yeah,
1 second. So if the sun didn't set early,
We're missing it.
either,
What?
The sun didn't set early.
so he says like that. He says there
what
was
he's making
he
it
says
up.
there was a miracle on the battlefield. He says the Yidden won the war so quickly, it was as if time stood still. He writes this in his commentary on Nach, the Ralbag, and he also wrote a famous work called Milchamas Hashem, the War of God, and he writes it there as well. Look for a second in number 4. What? No. Look what he writes in number 4. No.
This is a long
No,
one.
that's something else. That's a Nicholas. Look at number 4. Number 4 is the Avodas HaKodesh. Avodas HaKodesh is one of the greatest Kabbalists that ever lived. Rab Meir Ibn Gabbai. He was right before the Ramak, he was right before the Arizal.
Oh, wow.
But Meir Ibn Gabbai, he came to Eretz, he was in Eretz Yisrael, passes away 1540, sometime around there. In fact, the Shalah writes about the big 3 Kabbalists. He says, who are the big 3 Kabbalists? He says, Rab Meir Ibn Gabbai, Rab Moshe Cordovero, the Ramak, and then the Arizal. Those are the big 3. So number 4, this is Rab Meir Ibn Gabbai in the Avodas HaKodesh. Chassidus quotes from him a famous statement that just like the Eibishter has power in the unlimitedness of God, he also has a power bigvul. The same way the Eibishter has a power to be unlimited, he has an equally strong power to be limited.
Not the elephant thing.
V'zeh hoya mokum toy, says number 4, says Rab Meir Ibn Gabbai. This was the place of mistake. Mimenu zorchat saras haminas. From here shone the saras of heresy. B'mitzchais, on the forehead of ktsas philosophy b'nei men, of some of the philosophers of our people. Yesh mehem makchishim niflois v'nislam v'tarsein legamri. Some of the philosophers of our philosophers, they deny the wonders and miracles of our Torah legamri. They deny it completely. Kenirim midivrayim bepirish shemesh begiven daim, like what they write about the sun stopping and given. K'moshin isparsim mizeh adas al-bag, like the Ralbag's pirish is well known. Bepirish aparshahi ubesefer milchamois of im Hashem. The book is called Milchamas Hashem, the War of God. He names it a war against God. The war against God. Now, who actually coined that? He's not the first one who did it. There was a Rishon called Reb Shem Tov, Ibn Shem Tov.
Oh.
There were actually 2 there, big kanoim. There were actually 2 of them. Very important. One was a Zayda, one was an Einikel. It's actually fascinating historically. The Zayda was a major Kabbalist and terrifically against philosophy. The first one, Reb Shem Tov, Ibn Shem Tov, he was at the end of the 1300s, early 1400s, and he was vehemently against philosophy. against the Rambam, against the Ralbag, and he coined this. He was the first one to coin this phrase that the Ralbag Sefer is not the war of God, it's the war against God. It's a war against God. And he was a big Kabbalist. This the first Reb Shem Tov, Reb Shem Tov was his first name, Ibn Shem Tov was the family name. He had a grandson who had the same name, Reb Shem Tov Ibn Shem Tov, who loved philosophy. And in fact, he wrote a whole pirush on the Rambam's Moreh Nevuchim. So it's just funny how such a change. But Al Kopanim, you see what David is. You see how the Kabbalists look at the Ralbag, his war against God. Look at number 3. Go back to number 3. This is wild. The Kuzari. The Kuzari is one of the oldest Yiddish works of philosophy from the great Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, the great poet, and who's in. So there's a pirush on the Kuzari written by somebody by the name of Yehuda Muscato. I think he lived in Italy, talking about 500 years ago. In his introduction, he writes like this: Ubepirkei harav Reb Rechiel, in the works of Reb Rechiel Kosov, it says like this. This is a wild statement. Divrei harambam kroivim ale emes yosim en hasheker. The words of the Rambam are closer to the truth than to falsehood. Divrei haralbag kroivim ala sheker yosim en emes. The words of the Ralbag are closer to falsehood than to truth. The Divrei Yehuda Halevi kulam emes. But the words of the Kuzari is completely true.
He writes this about himself.
No. This was written. Yehuda Muscato 500 years ago is quoting from Pirkei Reb Rechiel, which I don't know what that is. But no, it wasn't Rabbi Yehuda Levi writing about himself. It was somebody much
he's
later.
He's writing it about the Kuzari.
Yeah, I mean, and he's contrasting it to the Rambam and the Ralbag.
What's the difference between what the Rambam said and the Rambam?
So the Rambam is closer to the truth more than to Sheker. The Ralbag is closer to Sheker than to truth. And Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is untouchable. So you see how people looked at the Ralbag, right? I mean, it's closer to falsehood.
He said he was left of the Rambam even.
Reb Nachman of Breslov said, Reb Nachman of Breslov was bechlal crazy against philosophy. And he said, if you hear a taich of the Ralbag on something that he writes on Nach, you have to tear Kriya.
Still?
You have to tear Kriya. He said this 150 years ago,
Yeah.
200 years ago,
Crazy.
200 years ago. Then we have the following story. I glad to mention this once by Fabrenga not too long ago. But no, there's so much noise in that room, in that kiddush room, you can't get a word out. I'm screaming on the top of my lungs, can't get a word out edgewise. Just I need someone to stand up there to be the clown for a few minutes for entertainment, and then anyhow. So it happened once in Lubavitch that the Tzemach Tzedek had lots of visitors for Rosh Hashanah. They had davened Shachris. Time for shofar, but the Tzemach Tzedek was in his room. That was the minhag. He went to his room for a bit. He came out when he was ready. Time is passing. Everyone's waiting. He's not coming out. So the Reb Marash was asked by one of his older brothers, Rabbi Yehuda Leib, you're the little kid. The Tata loves you. Go find out what's going on. The Reb Marash went, and he comes back and he says the Tata is busy learning Ralbag. The whole hundreds of people waiting for shofar. So Tzedek was learning one of the Ralbags for him. So Rabbi Yehuda Leib Maril tells the Reb Marash, what? The Tata's learning Ralbag? Now? Like right before shofar? So the Reb Marash said, I was wondering the same thing. I asked the Tata what's going on. And the Tata told me that the Ralbag once appeared to him and he asked him to do him some spiritual favor. And the Tata said he never had a good time, but today was a good time to do it. So he was busy learning the Ralbag's Piddush. So you see that it's not exactly as advertised, Anyhow, but Al Kaponim, that's the Ralbag got so much flack, and you see from number 4 from Rameim Gabai because of what he wrote by Shemesh Begiv and Doim. What does the Rambam say about it? The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim says. Maybe I'll quote it if I have it here. I got it right here. The Rambam writes in Moreh Nevuchim, you could check it up, it's black and white. The Rambam says, don't be mistaken from what you read about the story of the sun standing. No. I'll tell you what it means. What it means is that day was Kagodol Shebimei Hakayitz, was like the longest summer day. That's what happened. It was just a very long summer day. That's what the Rambam says. End quote. So what does he mean? It was like a long summer day. Now, by the way, when did that story happen? It was Gimel Tammuz.
Summer solstice.
It's the summer.
Yeah.
It is the summer.
How do we know it was Gimel Thomas?
That's a tradition we have. Gimel Tammuz. The Rebbe spoke about it.
It's the summer solstice.
It's the whole that. Yeah. So wait a second. So the Rambam's basically saying nothing happened. It was just a long day. It was perhaps one of the longest summer days. So does the Rambam hold like the Ralbag that nothing happened? There was no miracle? So the Abar Benel, in one of his Sfarim, it's called Mifalas Elikim, the Abar Benel says, yeah, the Rambam holds like the Ralbag. The miracle was on the field, not in the heavens, not in the sky. By the way, you know what the Ralbag's Rai, one of his Rayas is? Ralbag says, Moshe is greater than Yeshua. Do we have testimony that Moshe stopped the sun? We do in Gemara and Medrash, but not in the Psukim. Says the Ralbag, how could it be that Yeshua, the Talmud, accomplished more than the Rebbe? Can't be that the sun stopped. That's one of his big tainas.
Good time.
Oh, so the Abar Benel gives an answer. Abar Benel says, you're measuring prophets based on their miracles? The Abar Benel says, the Eibishter gives a prophet to do whatever's miracle is necessary for the time. It does not show on the greatness of the prophet. And it brings to mind the famous thing the Friedrich Rebbe quotes. The great Chassid Rashba was asked, do you think the Rebbe Rashab has Ruach HaKodesh? And what did he say? He said, I don't know. I know the Rebbe Rashab is a Rebbe. If a Rebbe needs Ruach HaKodesh, he has. If he doesn't, then he won't. Who cares? It's mamish just for to the Abar Benel. The greater miracle doesn't prove anything. Whatever is needed for the time, that's what you're given. Anyhow, so the Abar Benel says that the Rambam holds like the Ralbag, which means all the critique the Ralbag got, the Rambam should get the same thing. In fact, let's look at number 5 and 6.
More than that, what does it mean closer to the truth, further from the truth? Then just say they agree.
Right. In this point, right. Let's look at number 5 and 6. I have some interesting quotes here. Number 5, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov said that Yechoylin lahakir b'aponim shel ha'adam im lomad mer nevuchim. You can tell on a person's face if he learned mer nevuchim. Koloimar meaning sha'aponim shel zeh haloim et zeh ha'sefer nishtana lohar. And it's not positive; it's for the negative. You can see a negative sign in a person's face. Because bevadai hu oived sel elikim. Says Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, if someone learns mer nevuchim, he loses the image of God.
Wow.
Upon him the kedusha, he loses the holy face through this. Ukmoshiroyim b'chuch, see clearly, rubam kukulam sha'askud. Most people that were Isaac in these Sfarim in these times became apikursim gemurim. Says Reb Nachman, and they're chashud and all the averis in the Torah, because this sefer Mer Nevuchim and also the other Sfarim of Mechkarim of Mechakrim of the philosophers Sfarim. It uproots a person from the true Yiddish belief and from the Holy Torah.
He's talking about
and from God.
Specifically Jewish philosophy.
Yeah, Jewish philosophy. I forget that.
Greek.
Jewish philosophy. Like I said, he said if someone, when you learn Ralbag, you're going to tear Kriya. So Rav Nachman of Breslov was extreme. But look at number 6. This is an interesting, this is from an interesting sefer, but it says like this. That Tzemach Tzedek Omar Pam, he once said to his sons, Tzemach Tzedek had many sons, and they were all great people. He said the following, Rabbeinu Hazok and Omar, the Alter Rebbe said that the Rambam had a keiba bria, had a healthy, gut, healthy intestines. The Rambam could eat even snakes and scorpions, and it wouldn't damage him. Meaning, metaphorically, the Rambam could handle all types of ideas, it wouldn't hurt him. V'chein Amar al Atzma, the Alter Rebbe said, I also have a healthy stomach. V'chein Amar alai, said that Tzemach Tzedek, the Alter Rebbe said the same thing to me. But then the Tzemach Tzedek told his kids, Ach atem, but you, Einom Rashoim, you're not allowed to learn Mer Nevuchim. Va'ato, and then he pointed to one of his boys, you for sure not. We don't know which one. That's what he said. One of his, he said, you sicher nicht. All of you shouldn't, one of you for sure.
Who says number 6? Who says this?
Yeah, where's this from? 5 and
This
6?
is 5 and 6 is from a sefer that I have that has an interesting collection of stuff. But after each thing, it says where it's found. Number 6 is found in, it's called out of the Zechronis of one of the Chassidim. One of the Babaji Chassidim in his Zechronis, he quotes, not one of the mainstream, it's one of the non-mainstream.
Pointed at one of his sons and said,
And he
"You
said-
for sure not."
He said, all of you shouldn't learn, and you for sure not. You for sure not. You certainly not.
No, but that kid has a different penchant for
But why would he
reading
single
those-
him out in front of everybody like that?
It's like embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
He's giving them a hurrah. He's giving them a command to his kids. You definitely don't go that direction because you read too much. You know, you're reading too much of those novels. I mean, it's a normal thing. It makes a lot of sense.
You're pushing.
He did it to me a lot. That's why I find it hard to believe.
All right, okay, hold on. Okay, fine. Hold on. So where we hold, it seems like the Rambam learns, like the Ralbag, that the sun never stood. It was just it was a miracle on the battlefield. That's how the Abar Benel in his Sefer learns the Rambam.
It doesn't say it beferish.
Well, the Rambam just says that the day was like the longest summer day. Shaz, what does that mean? Because it was a regular summer day. So is the Rambam just saying it happened to be June 22nd, it happened to be the longest day, and there was no miracle in the heavens? That's how the Abar Benel learns. I just will tell you, others learn the Rambam differently. Some hold that according to the Rambam, the sun set on that day regularly. But Yeshua procured some special light. There was a miraculous light that didn't come from the sun. There was some miraculous light. I don't know, the northern light somehow started shining on that battlefield. There was some miraculous light. That's how some learn the Rambam, which is a whole different take on the story. The sun set, but there was a miracle. A light came from some other source.
A lunar eclipse.
But it doesn't make sense for that to be.
I know, then why does the...
Because why would the whole point of Mer Nevuchim, and in this point particularly,
right.
was to say it's not a miracle,
Right.
was to explain it away rationally.
The question
Make
is,
it a bigger miracle.
Shaz,
The northern lights came from Sweden and affected the.
There was light somehow. There was light shining from where? Who knows?
Yeah, that's.
There is a third approach. Just to be honest, for the Rambam, there is a third approach in the Rambam, and that is that one of the great Spanish philosophers, we haven't mentioned his name yet, was Rab Chistoy Carrascas. He wrote a sefer, Hashem, the light of God. And he was towards the end of he was a very influential figure after the expulsion of Spain in 1391. That predated the famous one in 1492. There was a major Gzeira. Yidden had to either leave or convert. It wasn't to the same degree as 1492, but it was quite serious. And the Yidden were distraught and broken, and Reb Chistoy Kreskas was mamash like a manig. He was like the Rebbe at that time. He was a philosopher, and he wrote a work called Hashem, the Light of God. And he was one of the greatest Spanish philosophers of all time. And there's many ideas there that we don't agree with, but that's fine. It's just an opinion. Like he has chidushim about free will that we wouldn't fly. But he was a great philosopher, and he says, you know what happened on that fateful day by the battlefield? He said, yeah.
This is according to the Rambam.
No, he says according to himself, hold on. He says that the sun never stopped, but it slowed. Because the Pasuk says the sun did not hasten to set. That's what it says in the Sefer Shoftim. He says it means the sun went slower than usual. The day was a half hour longer. Which, at least he says there was a miracle. It's against Chazal in the Gemara of Avodah Zarah that says it was 6 hours, 12 hours. He wanted to say a half hour because to him it makes sense that, more than that just doesn't make sense. But he says there was some feasible.
Makes sense.
But not stopping. It can't stop.
You can't slow down either.
Okay, let's know what exactly slowed. If the earth is slowing, the sun is slowing. So some want to suggest that the Rambam holds the same way. When the Rambam says that fateful day was like the longest day of the summer, the Rambam doesn't say it was the longest day. It was like the longest day. It was Taka Gimel Tammuz, it's summertime. But it was a half hour shorter than the longest day.
Right.
And it's stretched out, so some want to put the Rambam
it's
together
within
with
nature, because the nature had that longest day.
Exactly.
It's a natural phenomenon.
But something unique transpired in the heavens.
It wasn't supposed
So
to be
there's
the
three
longest day.
options in the Rambam. Al Kapanim, this is an example of a story in
the book.
Right. But still it gets a lot of flack because the Gemara in the Medrash says the miracle was much grander. Why are these Rishonim limiting the miracle? But they're not against the Psukim. This is just against the Gemara. Okay. The story of Yoina. Did it happen? You assume it happened. There's one Rishon. There was a Rishon called Ibn Kaspi. Now, as outlandish as the Ralbag was in his time, this guy was even beyond the
was
pale.
left of Ralbag.
He was under scrutiny, terrible scrutiny his whole life. Ibn Kaspi is his name, and he wrote a Pirush. And he says, Yesh Oimrim, that the whole story of Yoin and the whale was a vision that Yoina had. Yoina existed. Yoina was a prophet. But he says, do you think that Yoina spent 3 days in a whale? Come on. He says, like the joke with the selling the apples, right? No, that's not okay. An old joke. It doesn't matter. No. It's old. Let's get back to the rest. He says, but Yoina, he says it was a vision. The whole thing of the whale, of Yoina in the ship and being thrown off the boat and the storm, it was all a vision. But even he says, yes, I remember, but he's the only one who brings such a pirush. Even the Rambam didn't say that. In Moreh Nevuchim doesn't say that the whole story of Yoina never happened. But Ibn Kaspi brings. But Ibn Kaspi, in his time, he was almost excommunicated. But today, we've brought them all back into now he's almost a mainstream pirush. There is one opinion who says that, but it's only one opinion. Eiv. The Gemara in Baba Basra has many opinions about Eiv. When he lived, some hold one opinion in Gemara is that Eiv actually married Dinah. Yeah.
Wild deviation.
Now
we are
Levi married Dinah.
Shimon from. That's according to that's a different opinion. That's a different opinion. There's a whole shaila how he married Dinah. They were full. Goy is usher to his sister, so he wants because it was
4 months there.
No. That won't help you because of Goy. They were chayiv and arayas then. It was surrogate motherhood. They were conceived by different mothers. So we spoke about that. Anyway, that's anyhow. There's a whole Cham Sefer about that. But there is an opinion in Gemara that Eiv never existed. The whole story is a mashal.
Right, but that's not a vision. That's a mashal because it's telling us.
Yeah, the whole thing's a mashal. Eve himself never existed, according to this opinion. Lo haya v'lo niver. The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, which opinion does he say?
Never.
He says that the Rambam says Eve begins. There was a man in Utz. His name was Eve. Says the Rambam, there's no place called Utz in the whole Tanakh. Utz is a kid that you have, one of Nocher's kids that it mentions in the end of the next week's parasha. Yeah. Says the Rambam, so some say Utz is Eve. That was actually, that's it. The Rambam says Utz is not the Rambam says Utz means Eitzah. It's a place of advice. The Rambam says the whole story, the Rambam writes in Moreh Nevuchim, the whole story of Eve is a parable. Now that's nicht gefährlich because there is one opinion in Gemara.
Right.
One opinion in Gemara.
And the other opinions, they don't really know when he lives. It's very shaky.
Parable to
When did he write his book?
What time period?
Hold on.
One
I
second.
was throwing another couple of examples. I don't want to go too late. So I just want to one.
He was Tara's advisor.
For us to learn what we
That's
learned
according to
out of
some.
that. Regular story.
Yeah. He was an advisor. Gimel hoyu ba'isa eitza. Right, the child. If that's literal. Okay, but then now we're not talking about Gemara. No, because that's a whole other subject of Gemara. So now we're talking about stories of Nach. Chumash and Nach. Hoshea. Oh, I love this one.
That hurt.
In Trei Yasser, what's Trei Yasser? One of the Sfarim of Nach is a collection of 12 Nevi'im. These Nevi'im, some of them are very short. Ovad is one parak.
Yeah.
The Chachamim, or way back when, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah were worried that some of these small pamphlets would get lost. So they stuck it all together, They called it Trei Yasser, the 12 prophets. One of them is Hoshea. And in Hoshea, in the beginning, there's a story. Hoshea, the Eibishter comes to Hoshea and says, Hoshea, the Yidden, this was during the first Beis HaMikdash, the Yidden are worshipping idols, they've abandoned me. So Hoshea says, no, so choose a different nation, go to Korea, choose a different nation. So the Eibishter's like, oh yeah, that's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted some defense. Epis a good word. Epis say something for the Yidden. What do you say? Go find a new nation. Hashem tells Hosea, I want you to marry a certain Zoina. Her name was Gomer, the daughter of Divloim. Funny name. The Gemara discusses the name. Hosea marries her. Hashem says, I want you to have kids. He has kids. And then the Abishah tells Hosea, you're married to a harlot. Who said those kids are even your kids? I want you to divorce her. Hosea says, divorce her? She's my wife. I have kids with her. So Hashem says, so all of a sudden, you're doch married to an unfaithful wife, right? Or at least she was unfaithful before she married you. And because she's your wife, you can't say goodbye. And you want me just to leave the Yidden because they were unfaithful? This is a story in Hosea. The Gemara in Psachim discusses the story and makes it a very real story. It speaks about her and what type of harlot she was and everything, and it sounds like a real story. Oh, but look at this. Can I also? I'm the only one here, Nebuch, without a.
Mimosa.
The whole shit rolls out.
Exactly.
Shears continuing on the back of the bus.
By the way, that's very much like Yonah, the Picard.
Right.
Picard, right.
So the shaila is, did that actually happen? You assume it happened. Over here, there are numerous Rishonim that say it was all a vision. It's such a juicy story. We know Yehoshua married Rachav. Rachav was the most professional zone the world has ever seen. The Gemara says in Zvachim that when Rachav was 10 years old, she became a zona. For 40 years, she was the most professional zona in Eretz Yisrael. The greatest of the great would travel just to spend the night with her. I mean, the Gemara says in Tainus, right, even saying her name would cause a person to become Tomei. And then Rav Nachman says, well, I do it. I say her name and nothing happens. You know?
You
have to know her. Exactly. You have to know. You have to know.
Way too well.
So you're sure.
Said it also.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So Yeshua married the Zaina. So did Hosea marry her? So over here we have a slew of big Mefarshim who say, no, it never happened. Because it wouldn't make sense Hashem to command Hosea to marry a Zaina just to bring out a point. It's a message. If it's a message, it's a vision. Who says it was a mashal? Well, no, it was a nevuah. I'll tell you who it is in a minute, but they say that Hosea saw the whole thing happening. He visions himself marrying the Zaina.
Putting his hands around people.
He visions himself having children. And he visions the Abishah telling him to leave her. And he visions himself fighting. The whole thing was like a dream, a powerful vision. It was a nevuah. Who says this? The Meiri, who was one of the great halachists. He writes this on his commentary on the Gemara Psachim where the story is discussed. Not far-fetched.
Yeah.
The Abar Benel himself learned it was just a vision. And other Rishonim as well. And so that's another story in Nach, which it's a great story. So it's a juicy geschmack story. And you have a whole slew of Rishonim who say that's not what the Psukim mean. It's not what the Psukim never meant it literally, because it doesn't make. If Hashem wants to teach a message, He's not going to say, why would Abishah tell him to spend years of his life, force him to marry his son, and have to just to drive a message home? They believe it doesn't make sense, and therefore it's not literal. I'll give you one more example. And then we'll just get to the debate in 1305, and then we're going to be done. The Elisha and Eliyahu both bring kids back to life. They both bring kids back to life. It's clear in the Psukim and Sefer Malachim. The kid that Eliyahu brought back to life ends up being Yonah. It says in Medrash it was Yonah. And the kid that Elisha brought back to life was Habakkuk. So it seems like they brought kids back to life. It seems from the Psukim these kids died and these Nevi'im brought them back to life. Let's take the story of Eliyahu for a moment. Eliyahu, he went on top, he hovered above the kid, he breathed on him and brought him back to life. It sounds like the kid died. We once discussed if Eliyahu is Pinchas, he's a Kohen, how could he die? So there are some people say the kid never died. They spoil a good story. He was close to dying. The Radak, Reb David Kimchi, who was also a Pashtan, but he was sympathetic towards, what the Gemara and Medrash say. But he says there are those that say the kid didn't die. But he doesn't like it. He says, no. The kid died and there was Tchias HaMesim. The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim says the kid didn't die. Spoils a good story. No, I didn't bring the kid back to life. So you have, you have lots of these statements of the Rambam where he takes these good stories, where the kids, you teach them to kids and it gives them belief in the Eibishter and Tzaddikim. And the Rambam's pouring cold water over all the stories, Because of this, he got tremendous flack. But the Rambam will say, to defend his Moreh Nevuchim, I'm not arguing God for any pasuk in the Nach. I'm telling you what the pasuk means. You think the pasuk means that the guy died, the kid died. I'm telling you, it's not what it meant. It says the pasuk says until there was no breath left. That means, that you couldn't detect any breath. But the person was he was faintly alive. Now, the Rambam, though, is mainstream, right? He's not a Reformed Jew gospel. The Rambam is mainstream. But he writes these outlandish things in Moreh Nevuchim. So what happened in 1305? What happened was like this. Philosophy was getting really big in France, particularly southern France, in Provence. And the Rabbonim were so involved in philosophy that if you would go to Shul on Shabbos, you know what you would hear? Aristotle. Instead of hearing people quoting, Gemara's, people quoting Aristotle, Greek philosophy, and this philosophy, and Arabic, and it was infiltrating all the shiurim were, they weren't learning this, they were learning, the books of the Greeks. And it hit a point that people started teaching. You think there were 12 Shvatim? 12 Shvatim never existed. The 12 Shvatim are a mashal for the 12 constellations of stars. The war this week about the 4 kings and the 5 kings, the 4 kings are the 4 Yesodis of creation. Fire, Ruach, Mayim, and Ofer. The 5 kings are the 5 senses. Touch, smell, sight, etc. It's all just a mashal. So that's really getting worse. Not just as quoting philosophy, they're taking all the stories of... And then they started saying that Avraham and Sarah aren't literal either. Avraham and Sarah are just a mashal for the body and the soul. Now you may have heard that before. You know where that's from? That's from the Zohar. But these people were quoting it as if there was never really an Avraham and a Sarah.
The Zohar explains something in a way where it's also another...
Exactly. Not negating
Right.
But these Rabbanim were saying... Or not Rabbanim. At this point, we're not dealing with Rabbanim anymore. You're dealing with people that were just running away. And then they came and said that tefillin doesn't mean tefillin boxes.
Wow.
It means just your heart and your mind subjugate to God. Exactly. Ani Yehudi Balev. So there was a rabbi in Provence. His name was Rabbi Abba Mori Hayarchi. He was originally from Lunel, Lunar, Yoreach, so his last name was Yarchi.
Where is that, Lunel?
Lunel's in Provence, in southern East France, and that on the Mediterranean over there, that nice area there. And he was livid. He himself loved philosophy, but when he saw where it was heading, he wrote a letter to the Rashba. Okay. The Rashba's, this is where everything's going to culminate. The Rashba's living in Spain, in Barcelona. The Rashba is probably one of the greatest rabbis of the time. There was another great rabbi then whose actually yahrzeit is today. The Rosh's yahrzeit is today. Rabbeinu Osher. Tess. The Rosh originated in Germany, but the Christians were giving him a hard time. In fact, his Rebbe, the Maram of Rothenburg, suffered his fate. And the Rosh ran south, came to Spain. The story goes he went to Barcelona and he met the Rashba. They'd heard about each other. They spent a week behind closed doors together. And the Rashba said, all right, it looks like you know how to learn a little. I'm going to get you a job. Toledo then was Rovless. The Rashba sent a letter to the people of Toledo that I have a rabbi for you. The Rosh moved to Toledo, and that's where he lived for the rest of his life. In the year 1305, the Rosh is already in Toledo. The Rashba is in Barcelona. They were probably the two big guns, but there were many others. And this Rabbi Abba Mori Hayarchi, who's from Provence, he sends a letter to the Rashba and says, listen, this philosophy getting out of hand. It's crazy. It's nuts. We got to make a cherem against it. We got to make a cherem against it. A serious cherem. And the Rashba wrote a number of letters to other rabbis to get, what's taka going on in Provence? How bad is it? Because back then a cherem was serious, Nowadays, every time you open a Jewish press, you have 10 people here. Cherem since, 1993, But back then it was very serious. And the Rashba wrote some letters to other rabbis. What's going on in southeast France? What's going on? So there was a major upheaval. Many people were supporting philosophy, including the Meiri. The Meiri also lived in Provence, in Perpignan. Just to mention again, because it just pains me so much, the Shliach of Perpignan, Rabbi Pevsner, was a young man, just passed away not too long ago. And the fascinating thing is, before he died, he said, I want to be buried here.
Yeah, they just
in Perpignan.
Yeah.
He wanted to be buried in his Makom HaShlichus. Yeah. So anyhow, then listen, the schus of the Meiri should stand for his family. The Meiri lived in Perpignan. The Meiri apparently was okay with the philosophy. He did not want this cherem to go through. This Rabbi Abba Mori Hayarchi was living then in Montpellier. It's also a city in the same area, all the same. It's all on the nice, right near Monaco, just down the road from Monte Carlo. That whole area there, Nice and Marseille, the whole southeast France. So this Rabbi Abba Mori Hayarchi was living in Montpellier. These other rabbis in Montpellier said, "What? You sent a letter to Barcelona that the Rashba should put all the people who are doing philosophy in cherem? We have rabbis here in Montpellier. Who do you think you are?" It turned into such a maisa that something like the king of France himself got involved, and this Abba Moriachi had to flee. He had to run out of the city. Ultimately, though, the Rashba did put out the cherem. And we actually have it here. That in the tshuvas of the Rashba, we have about 5 tshuvas in a row where it's discussed, and you can mamish read it. It's fascinating to actually see the whole thing inside. And the Rashba quotes all these how these people were just taking the psukim out of their literal pshat. They said Avram and Sarah is just the body and the soul. They said the 12 sons of Yaakov and the 12 mazolos. They said Amalek is just the Yetzer Hara, the whole Amalek. There were people said, you think Amalek fought with us when we left Mitzrayim? Like the cynic says, you think, when a cynic tells you, you think they landed on the moon? You know what you tell the cynic? Well, you think there's a moon. You think there's a moon, there's no moon. You think there's a moon. Anyhow, you think Amalek is a Yetzer Hara. Light in his wife. You think his wife turned into a pillar of salt, these people said? Light is just a mashal for intellect. His wife refers to the body. And they went on this path until they said, that even tefillin isn't. Anyhow, so you have a number of tshuvas in a row. The Rashba signed the nut, and you have here a whole list of names. All the people that signed. The Rosh that signed on the cherem. The Rosh himself signed on the cherem too. Now, in the cherem, it's fascinating. The Rashba says like this: we are assuring, we hereby, I and all the bottom, the co-signed, we hereby forbid anyone less than 25 years old to learn philosophy or teach philosophy, right? And you can't teach philosophy to someone who's less than 25 either. And on pain of the cherem, it's only a cherem for the next 50 years. It's not forever, it's a 50-year ban. And there's a couple exceptions. You could learn Meir Nevuchim, which is a pella. Because what's driving the Rashba to make the cherem is people saying the stories of Tanakh. Many of them are just Mishalim. And Meir Nevuchim, the Rambam never said it about mitzvahs like tefillin, but he never said the shvatim or the mazolos, but he said some other things like we saw, which are. But the Rashba said no. The Rambam is no. We're not touching Meir Nevuchim. That you could learn. In other words, it's almost like I think the Vortiz, the Rashba, wanted to give people an outlet. You want to learn a bit of philosophy? Whatever Aristotle, the Rambam quotes that you could learn. And then he said also medicine. And he said a fascinating thing. Says the Rashba, medicine is not considered a secular subject. It's not a secular subject. And he says, why? Because it says in Parshas Mishpatim, V'rapo yirape, that a doctor should heal you. The Torah was being given to Yidden who would be in Eretz Yisrael, where it's only Yidden. Right. So who's going to heal you? Right. A Jewish doctor. How's he going to heal you? It must be he knows medicine. So the Rashba says, actually I tell this when people actually go study medicine, that they shouldn't feel like they're, according to the Rashba, it's a Torah science. It's not a secular science. It's Bechlal, not secular studies. We know the Rebbe Marash in the bathroom used to read books on medicine. So now we're saying, forget about the bathroom.
Yeah,
it's
we know that.
What? Oh, that's not a secret. I guess in his bathroom there was a whole library.
Yeah.
There's actually a Bach in Yeshiva today who just showed me a whole. He just bought for himself a whole library for bathroom reading.
Yeah.
I guess there's a
Of course.
bathroom reading. No, it's like
Very popular.
how like you're designating 45 minutes every day for bathroom time. But the problem is you get a good book, you end up just spending more time in the bathroom. By the way, the Rebbe Rashab once said that he enjoys bathroom time. The Rebbe Rashab said because all the pressure of avodah kind of pauses for a moment.
Wow.
You can take a breather. Yeah, he said that.
Wow.
When you go to the bathroom, it's like a breather.
What a
You can collect your thoughts. Yeah. Because when you're out the whole time, there's always the bathroom. You have a breather. Yeah. It's an incredible thing that Rebbe Rashab said. Yeah. Anyhow, back to the ranch. So they made this cherem, and it was fought. It was fought by somebody named Rabbi Yedaya Hapnini. He made the panini maker. What? No, it was fought by many, but like I mentioned. But Rabbi Yedaya Hapnini wrote to the Rashba a letter. It's about 20 pages in here.
Oh wow!
And in it, it's a long. It's Tshuva 418, very long. And in it, he tries to explain why it's okay. Philosophy is okay. It's not a problem. And ultimately, though, the masses accepted the cherem of the Rashba. The Rashba was just so powerful. He was such a leader that when he came out with this cherem and the Rosh as well, all those Rabbanim that were upset, they were upset that a cherem was going to be made. But once it was made, they closed their mouths. Even the Meiri Lucha, once the Rashba made the cherem, it is what it is. It is what it is. So, and then it was against the philosophy because of the issue was happening, that not only stories were taken out of context, but to the point they were taking mitzvahs out of context. Now, I just want to finish with this. So how did the Rosh is in Toledo. Barcelona, if you look on a map, is northeast Spain. It's right near Provence. So Barcelona, is a stone throw away. Toledo is like middle of Spain. Like, how did the Rosh get involved in this? Because originally the Rashba was hesitant to make the cherem because he knew that so many Rabbanim in Provence didn't want it. And he's like, why should I get involved? He was hesitant. When this Abba Mori Hayarchi, who was the one who got the whole ball rolling, saw that the Rashba was hesitant, he said, you know what? I'll reach out to the Rosh. So he got the Rosh involved because he knew the Rosh would agree with him. You know why? Because the Rosh came from Germany. In Germany, the Ashkenazic Rishonim didn't learn philosophy. They learned Bavli, Yerushalmi, they learned Nigla. In Spain, they learned medicine, astronomy, they learned all these other chachmas. The Ramban was a doctor, the Rashba was a doctor, Rabbeinu Tam was a banker. He was a businessman.
The Rambam also was a doctor.
Right, the Rambam, exactly.
Astronomer.
In Spain, many of them were melumad b'chol hachachmas. They were doctors and this and that. They were more into grammar. In Germany, Rashi, some say was a banker, some say he was a wine dealer. Rabbeinu Tam was a banker, etc., etc. So because the Rosh came from Germany, he had much less tolerance for philosophy. It was b'chlal a fremde zach. It was a strange thing. So Abba Moriarchi knew that the Rashba might have a soft spot because the Rashba himself learned all this philosophy. The Rashba himself was, in fact, the Rashba writes in one of his letters, he says, people think that why I'm against philosophy? Because I'm a guy, I'm stuck in my room, I'm a square man. The Rashba says, I've learned all of it before. It's fascinating. He said, I know exactly what this is. He said, people think I'm one of these old rabbis who's not with the times. I know it all. I've studied it all. And therefore I can tell you that it's dangerous. And the Rashba, and then he writes something which I think the Rebbe would love. he says that, some of you older people, you want to learn Limud Chol, you can handle it because you'll know what to accept and what to push away. But what about the kids, he says? He says the kids aren't that developed. The kids are going to be exposed to all these things. How are they going to know what they should accept and what they shouldn't? What do you do about the kids? And that's mamish the word that the Rebbe told people, you want to go to college, don't study Limud Chol when you're a kid. Later, there were people that later on, you can study later on, when you're spiritually and mentally healthy, but not when you're a kid. It's mamish what the Rashba says. He says the older people can handle it, but what about the kinderlach? Anyhow, so because in the beginning the Rashba he wasn't running to do the Cherem, so the Abba Moriachi reached out to the Rosh. And the Rosh Taka signed the Cherem. The Rosh had no sympathy for philosophy. To him, it didn't really belong. No place for it. And today is the Rosh's yard side. So ultimately, the Cherem was made, and it's this incredible episode of history of you see how once you start teaching a little bit of Torah Loika Pshutai, it's mamish the reform movement. It didn't take long until you lose everything, and it took a couple rabbis with guts and muscles to make a cherem, and it straightened everything out. It really straightened things out. So I just want to finish with one thing. This is an absolutely awesome story to do with the Rosh. Today is his yard site, and he was involved in this cherem, today's cherem. Says the Chida, V'da, you should know. This is in one of his forum. He writes like this. Shemotzasi is number 7 on the right-hand side. Motzasi b'Megillah Storov, I found a hidden manuscript of Rabbeinu Reb Chaim Vital Zal. Mitaris Yodei HaKodesh, from his pure holy hand. And this is what he writes. Reb Chaim Vital says like this. I found in a letter from Rabbi Yehuda, the son of the Rosh. When the Rosh passed away, he left the son Rabbi Yehuda, who took over the Rabbonis in Toledo. Rabbi Yehuda is a brother of Rabbi Yaakov, the Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim, or the Tur, was also the Rosh's son, but he actually didn't take over the Rosh in Toledo. Says Reb Chaim Vital, but I'm not ma'atikul, I'm not writing the entire thing. But let me tell you something that I saw in a letter of the Rosh's son. He says like this, Lefish yatzasi katan ma'ashkenaz, says the Rosh's son, because I was a kid when our family left Germany. Again, the Rosh was born in 1250. He leaves Germany about the year 1300. So his kids were born. Rabbi Yehuda says, I was a kid when we left Germany and we headed to Spain. Lo hisakti lishmoya ma'aseim. I didn't hear some good stories of our Zaydas. Rak ma'at mizer, only a little bit. Aval shamati, I heard from Adoni Avizal, from my father the Rosh, umay achos ziknasi zal, and from the sister of my grandmother, some good baba maises. Asher sipruli, they told me, Kizkeni, my father's father, Rabbeinu Yechiel Zal. Noilad was born b'shnas Tov Kuf Ayin. That is the year 1210. Ubihiyoisoi ben Tesain Shana, when my Zayda was 16 years old, he had a chaver Neman, a dear friend in yeshiva. His name was Shlomo HaKohen. And they made a bris together, Shekolech, that each one of them will split with the other in all of their mitzvahs. They're going to be a team. Now, it was the night of Yom Kippur. In Germany, on Yom Kippur, everyone lit their own candle. And if that candle goes out, it's a bad omen. That's why we light it all in shul together, you mix it up. So the candle, the beeswax candle of my Zayda Yechiel went out. That was there in shul, it went out.
Which one is this?
This is the Rosh's father. It's the Rosh's son saying a story about his Zayda, Yechiel. Ki kain minig of the Ashkenazim, lohoilich ner shaiva, to bring a candle to shul, shetadlik, to light entire night and day. But when he saw that his ner had extinguished, he was very afraid. And a few days later, he died. Cholamoid Sukkos, he died. So if that candle goes out, it's really a bad omen. Now, it was in shul, the candle was in shul, but he still couldn't help noticing. That's why you give it to somebody else. You give it to somebody else, or you mix it up. But make sure you don't look when you... You don't want to notice.
The father of Rosh passed away when he was 16?
When he was 16, he made this deal. He made this deal with his friend. We're going to split all the mitzvahs. When he died, unclear. The custom in Germany was they would put the coffin of the mace Al Evan Gedoyla, look on the left side, on a big stone, near the cemetery. And then they would open the coffin to see that maybe because they moved the body, make sure the guy's in a good position. Then Reb Shlomo HaKohen, the third line on the left-hand column. My father's friend, he approached my father, who had passed away, Eitzel Arba Moiser, within 4 amos of my father. And my father's friend started crying B'kol Ram, and he said in front of everybody, I am hereby reminding Rabbi Yechiel, my Gvir, my friend, in front of all of you, that he has to remember the part. We made a deal, we're going to split all the mitzvahs. He better remember this. All of a sudden, Rabbi Yechiel started to laugh. The person that had died, he was dead.
I would freak out.
He was laughing. B'soicha Aaron. No, but they took off the cover to make sure that he was straight, but he started laughing. Everybody saw. Now it's missing a line here where it says that everybody fainted. Vayhi hayoim. Hold on. Achrei moisai. It happened once after he died. Yomim, many days later, that my father's friend Reb Shlomo was sitting and learning in Beis Medrash by day, and all of a sudden he sees Reb Yechiel sitting next to him. The Koire imay bahalacha, and he was learning with him. V'shaloi minyanai, so Reb Shlomo asked Reb Yechiel, "What are you doing here? Aren't you in the next world?" V'amaloi, he said, because he said, "I'm in Gan Eden. B'toiv ma'od, things are wonderful there. And I have a special chair, it's just for me, amongst all the Chasidei Hadar. Things are wonderful." So Reb Shlomo told him, "Please, my master, Baal Brisi, we made a covenant together. I'm wondered, why were you given permission to come back to this world? Usually once someone goes to the next world, he's stuck there." Vayan loy, and Reb Yechiel answered, Vayomer, you should know, I was given permission to go back home. Like Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. But I don't want to, because people are going to say, "Oh, look at this Baal Guy, he wants to show off, he's greater than all the other tzaddikim."
What do you mean, Rabbi Yehuda?
He used to also go back home every Friday night to make Kiddush.
After he passed away?
And Yehuda HaNasi, after he passed away, he would go home every Friday night.
That's what we
So
said.
the Ramban explains Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was buried, his body was in the ground. But in heaven, there's a big factory full of extra bodies. Little different than ours, much more refined. And Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's soul would enclose itself in one of those bodies, and it would walk into his house Friday night.
Look like him?
That we don't know. Ramban doesn't say if it looked like him, but probably to some degree. Probably had a long beard and payas and yarmulke. Vayehi kishisha chadoshim achar zeh. 6 months afterwards, ula achar petirosa. It was obviously after he had passed. It was Leil Shabbos. It was once Friday night, in the middle of the night. This is the Rosh's son saying, my Zayda actually went home. Nira le'ishtoi bahakitz. My Zayda couldn't hold himself back, and he came from Gan Eden. Hitaka went home to his wife, while his wife was awake. Va'amar lo, and he told her, "What are you doing?" And he tells her like shit. He says, "Quick, get out of here. Take your kids and your daughters, take them all out of here, quick. Because tomorrow all the Jews in the city are going to be killed. There's going to be a pogrom." And unfortunately, in the 1100s, 12, 1300s, every other year there was horrible. V'chei nigzer al kol asvivas. It's not just here; it's all the neighboring towns. And says Rabbi Yechiel, we davened in heaven. I davened for all the kehillas. And my tefillah was accepted except for this town. So, and I was given permission to tip you off. She gets up middle of the night. She takes all the kids. She runs out of town.
Rosh's mother.
This is the Rosh's mother, right? Plus the Rosh and the Rosh's siblings, yeah. And she went down and saved all, I guess, whatever she could. V'kulam yot, so they all ran out of the town Friday night. My father, his brother Reb Chaim, and the mother and 6 sisters, and they all survived. Says Reb Chaim Vital, this I gathered from the above letter from the Rosh's son, and that the Rosh's son wrote it for his kids to remember the family story, and I left a lot of it out, says Reb Chaim Vital. But I just wanted to write this story. And the Chidah says this is the manuscript that I found of Reb Chaim Vital. Apparently, yeah, there must have been, yeah. So that's an incredible story about the Rosh's father. So you see, we're dealing with,
High level people.
yeah, from a different world, literally.
The Rambam
Literally.
says it's a mashal.
The Maisa with the Marshal. It's an incredible story that that there was a younger man, a student of the Marshal. So this is later. This is 1500s Lublin. A student of the Marshal whose wife had passed away. Nebuch is a young man, and but months went by, and this guy was walking around gloomy a whole day. So the Marshal tried to speak to him, to encourage him that maybe you got to pick up, you got to get things going. And the guy said, "I can't." He said, "Because my wife was sick. She was lying on her bed, and she told me, swear to me you won't marry anybody else. Swear to me you won't forget me."
Did the whole young did it?
He says, I swore to her. And then she passed away. And then he said, "It's a year. I'm stuck with my oath."
Yeah.
So the Marshal says the shvu is not binding.
Yeah.
You don't have kids yet. You can't make a shvu and not to do a mitzvah. You didn't have a boy and a girl yet. Now, it's not mamash a shayla because you could have a boy and a girl without getting married. He could just find a girl and have kids with her without getting married. But the Marshal he said the shvu is not a shvu. So the guy got married. This younger man, he got married to another woman. And shortly after, he died. He died. And everyone in town said it's because he violated the oath. And the Marshal's the one who said. So Marshal hears about it. And he says, okay, they should take the body to the cemetery, dig a grave, put him in, don't cover him with dirt. Rather, the Marshal says, he told the head of the Chevra Kadisha, I'm writing a letter. I want you to put the letter in the guy's hand. In the letter it said, he would say, I, Shloimeh, the Marshal's name, I hereby am asking from the Bez and Shalmaila that I paskin correctly, and therefore, with the koyach of Torah that's in me, I demand that this person should not be punished for violating the oath. He did not have to keep it, and therefore his time hasn't come. He should come back.
Wake him up.
Maybe
And that was the note. Hold on, that was the note. That was the note. So the head of the Chevra Kadisha took the note, put it in the deceased hands. They lowered him in the ground. They didn't cover him. Later on, this guy opens his eyes. Like, where am I? He climbs. He climbs out of the. Listen to the end of the story. He climbs out of the thing. He walks out. He's still wearing his tachrichim. He's walking. He's like this undead fellow. He's walking, and he walks back home. He walks through the front door. His wife sees him.
She dies.
There's another story with the Shmuel in Nikolsburg. She doesn't die, but she starts screaming. She runs out of the house. She runs to her parents, and she says, "My husband's." Anyhow, word starts spreading around the town.
He died. Finally, he's back.
Exactly. Can't get rid of this guy. Word starts spreading around town. And the next day. He walks into the base. He walks into the kollel. He was learning in kollel then. He walks into the kollel. He's still wearing his tachrichim.
You can get rid of them.
So
they're expensive.
Hold on. So the Marshal tells him, "Listen, it's nice to see you again. You got to go back home and change. You can't walk around like this." He went back home. He changed. He came back to kollel, but no one wanted to sit next to him. People were looking at him. I was afraid. So the Marshal thought, "I got to do something here." What could he do? So what the Marshal did, and you're going to ask, how do we know the story? The Marshal summoned the angel which is appointed on forgetfulness. And the Marshal orchestrated through the angel that the entire town will forget the story. Will forget the story. Listen, this is the legend. I mean, it's quoted in authentic Sfarim.
Well, you know the story from the Marshal, no?
Yeah, he's the only one that remembered it. Yeah. The entire town forgot.
Wow.
The wife forgot too.
No sense.
No, he goes back home later and the wife says, it's not. Everybody forgot about the episode of his death. It's fascinating. And that was in the mid-1500s, only 450 years ago.
Listen, we all grew up on the stories of the...
Anyhow, all right.
Wow.
What was the story from Shmuel and Nicholas? You said there's another story.
I'll tell that story quickly. That's a story that Alter Rebbe said.